Hello, welcome everyone. I hope you had a good lunch. I barely made it. I'm glad you all made it too. I'm very happy to welcome you to the session on reflecting on academia in our field. I'm Petra Eisenberg, I'm the session chair. And now it's my pleasure to introduce the first talk by Ali Savgad. And just a quick reminder, please post your questions on Slido, and the room we're in is called Oklahoma Station 5. Okay? So our first presentation is entitled Scientometric Analysis of Interdisciplinary Collaboration and Gender Trends in 30 Years of IEEE Viz Publications.
Okay, thank you, Petra, for the introduction. So this work was a scientometric investigation of collaboration and gender using IEEE with visualization publications from 1990 to 2020. So why collaboration? Well, there is abundant evidence out there that points to the importance of collaboration and diversity for research, such as pulling expertise together, exchanging ideas, solving complex problems, and even improved research outcomes. And there's also this known issue of gender imbalance in computer science field in general, with women having a much smaller share of education and research. So hence our motivation for looking into these two topics within our field. So our main research objectives in a nutshell were to learn about the scope, status quo, and the trends of collaboration, disciplinary diversity, interdisciplinary research, interinstitutional collaboration, gender, the status quo of gender parity, and like where we are headed in the future. So I'm going to tell you quickly about how we collected and analyzed data, some of the biggest challenges that we faced, and then I'll tell you about most important findings. Now, to start, we automatically analyze all the IEEE Viz publications from 1990 to 2020, and for each paper, we collected data such as title, name of authors, number of authors, abstract, keywords, affiliations, and etc. So this is like our data that we used. So next, to infer disciplines and institutions, we used authors' affiliations. Using myself as an example, Ali Savgad is with the Manning College of Information and Computer Sciences at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. Well, my high-level discipline is computer science, and my institution is University of Massachusetts Amherst. Now, initially, to infer gender, we used two first name-based automated gender inference services, Gender API, Genderized IO. There's discussion in the paper why these two. And the way they, for a given name, these tools give you like a gender label and also like a confidence measure. Now, well, as you can imagine, this whole process of inferring gender, discipline, and institution was not as easy and as straightforward as the examples that I just gave you. In fact, it proved to be really challenging, messy, and error-prone. And I'm going to tell you about a number of biggest challenges and how we addressed them. So one was missing information. For instance, many of the affiliation information did not include any information about author's institution or about their disciplines, especially in the earlier years of the publications. Then there were discrepancies and ambiguities. For instance, a person's name could appear differently on different publications, or institutions' names would be like abbreviated in different names. And also people use names such as like a research group name that we could not like directly and confidently map to like any discipline or institution. Now, biggest challenges for inferring gender were missing and inconsistent first names. We had a lot of those, like every 1 out of 3 names. And also, like limitations of automated gender inference tools that, well, they can't do more than binary gender classification. And also, there are known issues with like non-American European names, such as like Indian and Asian names. To address and rectify some of these challenges, for affiliations, what we did, we spent tremendous amount of time basically manually completing, validating, and harmonizing this information and inferring disciplines. For instance, if an affiliation said HCI Viz Lab, what we did, we actually visited their research website, looked at the description of what they do, looked at their papers, and then we inferred like computer science, human-computer interaction, and data visualization as the primary like research disciplines. And then also replace all the variations of the institution names with the complete name. Now, for missing and incomplete first names, what we did, we crowdsourced basically name completion tasks. Each paper was given to a crowd worker, and they were instructed to use online resources such as like Google Scholar and personal and research websites to find the complete names of the authors of that paper. Now, at the end of this round, the issues of like name dropped from 32% to 10%, but we were still not happy, especially that we needed first names for gender inference. So we did another round of manual basically work, which at the end they like dropped the issues from 10% to less than 5%. So we also crowdsourced gender inference because we wanted to include like basically human judgment in the process. So the difference here was that each paper was given to 4 different crowd workers, and they were similarly instructed to look online, similar resources, and then try to assign a label for each of the authors. Well, when this was done, what we did, we looked at all the 4 basically labels for each author, and if there was 3 out of 4 or 4 out of 4 agreement between those, we accepted that, like assigned gender. Otherwise, we assigned unknown for that person. Well, because this is a very sensitive topic, what we did next, we decided to have a very conservative approach, and then we compared the assigned genders between the 2 automated and also the MTurk. And if there was a 3-way agreement between these for a person, then we accepted that gender label, which is this column at the end, which is called matched. Now, because of this, there was a decrease in the number of men and women, and there was like a somewhat notable increase in the number of unknown cases. Now, well, in the absence of any reliable, solid data out there that you can do this kind of analysis, we decided that being conservative perhaps is like less harmful than overestimation. So one last challenge was to how to meaningfully organize the discipline information that we derive. For example, how computer vision and computer graphics would relate, if at all. So in order to solve that problem, we used an existing hierarchical ontology of academic disciplines. And for instance, according to this ontology, scientific visualization is a subcategory of computer graphics, and which in itself is a subcategory of computer science. So we use this ontology to complete the hierarchy whenever we can. If one discipline was, for instance, scientific visualization, then we added the computer graphics, computer science. And if you only had computer graphics, we added computer science. Like basically, we completed this upstream. And the reason was to help us with the analysis of diversity, the disciplinary diversity that I'm going to present in a second. Now, some of the high-level findings. So looking at the collaboration from high level, it seems that we really like to work in teams from like 2 to 5, followed by like 6. And then we found papers with like 17 and 16 authors, but they seem to be outliers. Now, I can't really tell you why we like those numbers, 2 to 5. But what I can tell you is that in general, collaboration seems to be on the rise. And especially after the first 10 years of the conference, there's an increase in the average number of authors per papers. So we need to further investigate this observation to understand why. Is this simply because there are now more people in the field, or is this because there's been a shift in the culture towards collaboration? So one of the not so good news that I have is that we lack disciplinary diversity. So if you look at that band at the top, shows computer science, computer graphics, data visualization, most active disciplines, of course, not surprising. But then what I want you to pay attention to is the rather weak presence of other, basically, disciplines in this sphere. If you look at disciplinary collaboration, interdisciplinary collaboration, we see a similar lack of diversity where most of the work happens between just a few disciplines like computer science, engineering, and medicine. So this perhaps points to these missed opportunities for enriching and extending theoretical and empirical and applied knowledge of visualization through disciplinary diversity and exchange. As the number of publications increases over years, there is also an increase in the number of interdisciplinary papers, but as I said, it lacks diversity. If you look at interinstitutional collaboration, the line is like strangely flat, or like across all 30 years. And if we drill down on interinstitutional collaboration, we see that most of the collaborations happen between 2 or 3 institutions, those 2 at the top. Now, then perhaps what we need to do is that to find ways to better help researchers to find and connect potential collaborators, across other institutions. One of the good news that I have is that the women participation in visualization research in general is on the rise, and it changed from less than 5% to almost 17% in 2020. Despite this good news, this is still less than half of the men's share of the space. Now, if the current trends continue, the gender parity will not be reached most probably before the end of this century. This means that we need to reevaluate and intensify our current efforts and approaches towards inclusion and equity in visualization research. Well, I'm going to wrap up with summarizing the main takeaways of this work, that collaboration in general is on the rise, good news, but then it lacks diversity. So interinstitutional collaboration seems to need a push, and gender balance and inclusion is still a significant challenge. And also, non-binary gender analysis is an open, pressing challenge that we need to address. I finished by mentioning that all the data that we collected is publicly available. There's a link to the data set on the paper, and there's a ton of more of analysis and reflections. And I invite you to read the paper if you're interested. Thank you.
Thank you, Ali. We have time for a few questions, and there are a few interesting ones already on Slido. So one of the top questions right now is if you can tell us a little bit more about the crowdsourcing part of the data analysis, and how come you use crowdsourcing and didn't contact the authors directly?
So we didn't know if it's okay to contact the authors directly. Okay, so we thought of that, and so we thought maybe we want to start with a crowdsourcing. So what we hope was that if with crowdsourcing would give us better results, and we could go perhaps beyond just binary classification of gender, but that did not happen, and I do not know exactly why. There were a number of basically individuals that we had other label for them, but the number was too few, and we decided that we just need to, this would be a disservice if we say this is the number of basically non-binary people of this community. So that's, I don't know exactly why it didn't. Maybe if we provide more information, like pronouns to as we on websites, like research websites, maybe that could help with this crowdsourcing, as an approach to gender analysis.
Right. And since I'm the session chair, I can ask my own question. So you showed us that the size of number of authors is increasing. Did you check for any regional trends, if there's parts of the world where people have larger teams than in other parts of the world? Since you had the affiliations, anyway, you could have. The number of authors increasing for what? Sorry, I didn't catch that. Is there a relationship between number of authors on a paper and the region they're publishing from?
Yeah, good question. No, unfortunately, we did not do that analysis, but that's something interesting that we can follow up on.
One data ethics question. What do you think about the data ethics of collecting gender information from websites, etc.? Do you think author consent is needed? To provide the data, etc.?
I mean, that's a good question, and to be honest with you, I do not have an answer. But then, if you think about how automatic systems do it, they just use names, to enter gender, and the ethics definitely is the topic that we need to consider in this, kind of activities. But I don't know how. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Let's thank the speaker again, and this. All right, our second paper stays in this realm of looking at our field and its authors, and it's going to be presented by Hong Tao Hao, and it's called 32 Years of IEEE Viz, Authors, Fields of Study and Citation.
Hi, everyone. This is the presentation for 32 years of IEEE Viz, Authors, Fields of Study, and Citations. It was almost December last year, and I still did not know what to submit for Viz this year. And I asked myself, why not study Viz itself? And that's how the project started. So if you submitted viz this year or last year, you would know that we now have 6 core areas that represent the common research interest in our field. And papers are now reviewed and rejected in a more coherent way, but that was not always the case. For those of you who are just like me, who are new to viz, you might want to know that before 2021, we had SciViz, we have InfoViz, and we have VAST, and papers are reviewed independently by themselves. So just like what Professor Robert Moorhead said in the opening ceremony, viz is now a unified field. But we know so little about our field. For example, what's the impact of viz? Do people outside of our viz community or even outside of computer science care about viz? Is viz just a game to itself, or it is impacting outside of computer science? We don't know. We also do not know a lot about our authors. For example, the official website of IEEE Viz mentions that the conference will convene an international community of researchers and practitioners from universities, government, and industry to exchange recent findings. The question is, how international? How many countries are represented in this? And it also mentions the author affiliations. But we don't know how many authors are from universities, how many from government, and how many from the industry. And since this has been more than 30 years, are there any changes in those over the years? We don't know. So motivated by those, we have these 2 research questions. First, we want to know where viz stands in science. What are these topics? Whom viz cited and who are citing this? We also want to know more about these authors, alongside from their gender. And so we want to know their affiliations, their types, and their country origin. We also want to know how they have been collaborating with each other in terms of affiliation and in terms of their country origin. And for the how we collected data, that is the most complicated one. It took us almost 2 months, and I almost gave this project up because it was so difficult, a lot of data that is missing. But ironically, I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. The general idea is that we collected the paper DOI based on the VizPop data authored by Petra et al. Thank you so much. And then based on those DOIs, we collected paper data, author data, and fields of study data from OpenAlex, which is our main source of data, and we also collected some data from the IEEE Explorer. If you want to know more about the details or you want to use our workflow in your study, please go to our study for more details. Results are the most exciting part. For the trends, we found the viz is becoming increasingly popular in terms of the increasing number of publications each year and the number of unique authors each year. So we are talking about unique authors. So for those of you who had more than 10 presentations each year, we're only going to count you once. Sorry. For the impact, we found the viz is becoming increasingly impactful. As we can see in the left panel, that the impact of viz is increasing because there are an increasing number of non-viz papers that are citing viz papers. As Ali said, viz is becoming more collaborative, but we analyzed the collaboration from a different angle. We looked at the percentage of papers that are cross-country collaboration or not, or cross-type collaboration or not. By cross-type, we mean the collaboration between universities and authors from non-universities, like the government agencies, or the industry, or from NGOs, so those type of non-educational affiliations. We found that both collaborations have been increasing. As you can see here from the left panel, that, for example, in the past year, almost half of all the viz publications are the results of cross-country collaboration. That's amazing to me. However, those cross-country collaborations are concentrated. As you can see in the figure, that the top 10 collaborative countries were present in 98% of all the collaborations. And collaborations among those top 10 countries constituted over 70% of all the collaborations. So even though cross-country collaboration is on the rise, it's a small party. For authors, we found that there is an increasing number of countries represented in this. For example, in the past year, authors from 26 countries were present. I guess it's because of Zoom. That participation, however, is very concentrated. As you can see in the figure, that authors are mainly from the top countries. You can see that US is still dominating this. And an interesting finding is that authors from China is increasing. Although US is still dominating this, there have been some redistributions. So you can see in the figure that the percentage of authors from the US has been constantly declining. And authors from China, that percentage has been increasing. For affiliation types, we found that the majority of authors are from universities. Only a small portion of authors are from other types of affiliations. I just want to do a very quick poll here. Who are not from universities? Please raise your hand. Yeah, I only saw 2 people, and including Patrick, 3. So collaborations have been increasing. You can see here that the cross-type collaboration has been increasing, but an interesting finding is that if you look at the right panel and the yellow line, you can see that the number of authors from non-educational affiliations have been very stable over the years, at around 100 over the past 32 years. So how can you interpret this finding, that the number of authors from non-educational affiliations have been very stable, whereas the percentage of papers of cross-type collaboration has been increasing drastically? So my interpretation is that those very small but very stable number of authors from non-educational affiliations have been very collaborative, have been very active in collaborating with authors from universities. For fields of study, we look at the distribution of topics of these papers and of papers that are cited in this, and also papers that are citing this. As you can see, by the way, the y-axis is in log scale. So you can see that most of the topics of all these papers or cited papers or papers that are citing this, most of the topics fall into computer science or mathematics. So our conclusion is that this is mostly about, built upon, and impacting computer science and mathematical studies. Whether it is a good news or not, we don't know. For citations, which we care about a lot, so you can see here the lion's share of citations were taken by a very small number of papers. So you can see here that the top 10 papers took over 60% of the citations. And we also looked at what factors are impacting citations. We looked at the publication year and the conference tracks, whether it is a conference paper or not, which is not relevant right now because all of us are journal papers, and then the number of authors, and whether it's a cross-type collaboration or not, cross-country collaboration or not, and whether it has US authors involved or not, and whether it is a award-winning paper or not. So we run a linear regression. We found that only the publication year and also whether this paper is an award-winning paper or not are impacting the citation counts. So to recap, thesis has been becoming increasingly popular, impactful, and collaborative. The authors are very diverse geographically, but yet very concentrated. And for author types, universities are now dominating this. Over 77% of all the authors in the past 32 years have come from universities. For fields of study, this is mostly about built upon and impacting computer science and mathematics. For citations, we found that earlier works and journal papers and award-winning papers had more citations, which means that those award-winning committee are very clever. They can see the potential of papers. Yeah, thank you, and I'm happy to take questions. And if you want to know more about project, please go to the official website of our project. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have time probably for one quick question, but go to Slido after to answer the other ones. So the top-rated question right now, I think, relates to one of the slides you had. Maybe you can bring it up about what the areas are that cite viz. And I'm going to add a question here. How many of these citations are to the D3 paper?
What?
What are these people citing is the question. Here are the different areas that cite viz papers, but what papers are they citing? Is it a small number of papers that they're citing? Are these specific domain-related papers that are being cited? What is being cited in mathematics from the visualization community, for example?
What have been cited?
Yeah, which paper is being cited? Which papers, perhaps?
Oh, we didn't look into that details.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I'm sorry, I have a hard cap at the end of the session, so we have to move to the next speaker. Thank you very much. The next presentation will be given by Shishun Guo, and it's called SD squared, I think. Slicing and dicing scholarly data for interactive evaluation of academic performance.
I'm Zhishun Guo from University of Notre Dame. Today, I would like to share our work, SD-squared Slicing and Dicing Scholarly Data for Interactive Evaluation of Academic Performance. As we know, assessing the scholar performance of a researcher is really important for a lot of decision-making tasks, such as hiring a postdoc student and hiring a tenure-track faculty member. Nowadays, many universities rely on the public available online resources to make the decision or evaluation, like DBLP lists research outputs in textual format. And besides this, Google Scholar makes the basic statistic analysis, such as the citation, H-index, and item index. Eminer further shows the analysis of collaboration relationship and the research interests. But do you think it is enough? Obviously not. The requirements of the scholar performance are much diverse and complicated. These tools are limited. Of course, they cannot facilitate the discovery of the interactions among multiple factors. For example, we want to hiring a faculty. Other than the number of publications or citations, we also care about what's the quality for these citations, like whether these citations are from the top venues or high-quality papers. And also, we are more interested in their independent research performance. But these tools cannot, these questions cannot be answered by the above tools. So to provide the tool to satisfy users' evaluation and comparison requirements as many as possible. Firstly, we summarize the potential tasks here. The first one is we want to investigate the publication records by attributes. Like, we want to answer the question, if the researcher is still actively publishing, where does the researcher publish? And what are research fields of the researcher over time? And also, the second one is we want to understand the researcher's citation records by attributes. Like, does the citation number increase or decrease over the years? What's the major research field that sets the researcher? And is the researcher cited by high-impact papers at top values? What's more, we care about the independence of the researcher. How many papers are published by the researcher without his advisor? How many citations come from these papers? And does the researcher rely on certain collaborators to publish on a specific field? What's more, comparing two individual researchers into two groups of researchers is also really, really important. Like, for groups of researchers, maybe we can group two scholar students and to compare whose students have more papers and citations during their graduate study. So based on these tasks, we can conduct our visualization tool SD², and here is a screenshot. And I will introduce each part step by step. The first step is the scholar view, where we used to select scholars as the paper set to explore later. And the second part is publication view, where we can check the publication status over the years, and then help us to select which paper sets over the specific time range we want to explore using the red part. So the red part is the most important one, is the hierarchical histogram view, where we allow users to break down the set of papers or citations into a hierarchy of bars to answer the specific question. So for now, I think maybe you are still a little confused. How could we evaluate the performance? So I think the first one is, as we know, there are so many tasks we want to do. But when we want to explore a tool to analyze it, to evaluate all of them, firstly, we should formulate the problems as easy as possible. The second one is we want to know what kind of information we want to explore. So these two questions are main questions when we build these tools. So the first one, we formulate all of these tasks into a problem of exploring multiple paper sets with attributes. So with this formulation, the relations among researchers or even researcher groups, in fact, we can build them, like if we want to explore a researcher's output, in fact, we are exploring the researcher's single researcher's paper sets. So if we want to answer the fourth question, it indeed is we want to compare the researcher A's paper set and the researcher B's paper set. And like if we want to compare two groups of researchers, our question is we want to compare group A's paper set versus group B's paper set. So the problem could be much easier than before. And then in our work, we support 4 operations for each scholar: not, ignore, and or. Not means excluding. Ignore means the scholar is irrelevant to the paper set being generated. And means intersection, and or means union. So the paper set produced by this set operations is the papers authored by any scholars labeled by or, intersected by the paper authored by all scholars labeled by and excluding the papers authored by any scholars labeled by not. And here is an example. Here, each column, the left part, each column corresponding to each scholar. So here we want to explore the Benjo, Gogofellow, and Caviller's work. So the first line, the green circles, represent the different set operations for the corresponding scholars. So here, and or produce the paper set authored by Gogofellow or Caviller, intersected by the papers authored by Benjo. And besides, follow this formulation. When we want to answer the publication records, in fact, we just need to analyze the attributes of the set of researchers' public papers. And when we want to understand the researcher's citation record, in fact, we just need to analyze the attributes of the researcher's citations. So after formulating the problem, we designed the hierarchical histogram to break down the set of the papers. We provide a series of papers attributes and the citation attributes to analyze each of them. And for citation attributes, we provide the published year, values, CCF rank, and also titles. And here we give another example for our hierarchical histogram. We can put up to 2 paper sites in this view to explore and compare. The upper and lower histogram show different paper sites. For example, in this result, the upper one shows Julian's work with Yuri, and the lower one shows their joint work. So each paper set will be partitioned according to different attributes in a hierarchical way. Like in this example, the paper set will be partitioned by published year first, and then partitioned by published CCF rank, and then published venue. And the leaf layer represents each individual paper, and the height of the bar of the leaf layer represents the number of citations. So in this example, first I want to mention Julian was a postdoc student in Yuri's work, Yuri's group from 2011 to 2014. So when we observe the upper histogram, we can find that Julian without Yuri still have a lot of papers published in the top venues like WWW, Europe's AAAI. What's the difference is their joint work will achieve more citations, like the lower histogram shows. Yeah, and then I will show you a video about how our tool works.
Here, we study the relationships between Yin Cai Wu, Nan Cao, and their PhD advisor, Hua Mingqu. We create 4 sets of papers for investigation. Wu's papers without Chu, Cao's papers without Chu, Wu's joint paper with Chu, and Cao's joint work with Chu. Overall, we can see that Wu had more joint work with Chu, but Cao had more independent work. Now we compare their independent work. By grouping using the CCF rank attribute, we can see that both of them published papers at top venues in rank A and rank B. We can see the publication venues by changing the third level attribute. By mousing over a bar of TVCG, we can easily identify all of their TVCG papers. We change the height of the vertical bar to indicate the number of papers published in each venue. We remove the publication year to see the publication venue and their ranks more clearly. We find that Cao published in more venues of rank A, but Wu received more citations from his rank A papers. We can add a level of citation venue to see where the citations come from. We find that most of the citations of TVCG papers are also from TVCG. We use the mini-map to zoom in on specific regions for clearer observation. We switch the publication venue and the citation venue. This view allows us to see where the citations from a specific venue go to. We can remove some venues for clearer observation. We change the citation venue to the citation year, which shows the venues being cited in each year. We may further group the citation years to perceive an overall trend. We find that Wu was cited for similar venues before and after 2014, but his number of citations increased. For Cao, he was cited for more venues to increase his citation number.
Due to the time limit, I cannot show more case studies, but I indeed want our tools can be useful for you if you want to evaluate some scholars' performance. And we provide
Here,
oh, sorry. Yeah, we provide our code on GitHub and welcome everybody to like contribute. Or if you have any questions, please feel free to contact with me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to ask one question, and it has something to do with data ethics. So, comparing researchers or research groups based on their performance can be very subjective because, of course, you picked and chose metrics. Can you talk a little bit about what do you think about whether it's, what are the ethics behind writing a tool that helps more easily to compare researchers?
You mean how to easily compare two groups?
No, are there any ethical concerns with, giving your tool to hiring committees or, I don't know, scholarship committees, etc., for comparing people? Are there any concerns you might have about the metrics you're offering to people? Are there things missing? No.
Yeah, in fact, we try our best to provide the tool more complexity, but sorry, not complexity, more flexible for users to explore. So, like when we compare two groups of something, I think maybe we give the users the more flexibility to pick like which group they want to compare or which students or something.
But do you give the users the ability to add data that might be missing?
They do not need to add the data. Of course, for our data, our paper site is based on the publication data provided by Microsoft, and we need to deal with the problem. The authors have the same name, so when you like input the name in our input box, and then we will automatically crawl the data from their Google Scholar webpage. And then,
yes, but there might be other factors of academic performance beyond papers, right? There are things like service to the community, tools they've written, and many other things that play a role in people's academic performance. You picked some, but that's not all. So,
yeah, that's a good question. Maybe, yeah, we can explore it in this.
Okay,
Yeah.
so let's thank the speaker again.
Thank you.
Okay, so please go up. And our next talk has, I think, a lot of reference, probably we'll see, to the panel that ran yesterday on visual analytics systems. It will be presented by our Yu Wu, and it's called In Defense of Visual Analytics Systems, Replies to Critics.
Thank you, Petra, for your kind introduction. So today we will talk about a very different paper that you normally do not see in the visualization conference. It's called In Defense of VA System, Replies to Critics. VA systems are basically softwares applying visual analytics technique to solving a domain-specific application problems. And it has been applied successfully to many domains, such as XAI sports. And it has also becoming one of the most important research fields in the visualization society. And however, despite of those success, we often hear many provoking questions from our end user, from the developers, and from the peer researchers. For example, what are their research values? So what, in essence, can the visualization community learn from solving a domain-specific application problem? And many reviewers will have criticized on the evaluation, saying that they are often done informally, and this is a weakness found in many paper submissions. And eventually, some basic question is that, is our field even scientifically and methodologically rigorous? And of course, our field has a long tradition in publishing viewpoints, reflection, and discussions on those provoking questions, like what are the values of application papers and how can we conduct more rigorous design study research. And however, those discussions are based on authors' own reflection, while they are definitely very insightful. And we argue that serving a broader range of researchers will lead to a more comprehensive and a representative understanding. Towards this vision, we contribute to research on visualization research, that we try to collect large data sets to study the underlying doing of VA system research to figure out how can we conduct better VA system research. And specifically, we contribute to an interview study. We start from the very probably tasteless question, so what rejects your paper submission? We threw these questions to 24 researchers from different application domain and different academic age. We got more than 200 reasons, and which are further grouped into 36 types of common criticisms. To enable our analysis, we just map those criticisms to the corresponding paper sessions, such as introduction, literature review, problem abstraction, data analysis, visualization design, so on and so on. You should be familiar with those steps. For example, the 10th criticism is saying that there is an insufficient abstraction from domain to VA problems. And the C17 will be unclear design, rationale, or justification of visualization design. And so far, it sounds like we are discussing a pitfall or suggestions on how to writing a paper. So it's pretty much the art of writing papers. But our intention is to answer, how can we conduct more rigorous research on VA systems? To do that, we convert the low-level criticism from the interviews results into high-level problems and issues, and provide our own reflections. Specifically, we remap those 36 types of criticisms into the high-level criteria as proposed by Lee et al. In their VIS 2019 tutorial Beyond Paper Types. So as you can see, there are a total of 8 different criteria, such as relevance, originality, soundness, justification, and evaluation. Once again, you should be very familiar with those terms. But the interesting question is that which of those are more specific and fundamental in VA system research? So the first issue that comes to our attention is clarity. So clarity appears as one of the most common concerns for VA system research. Reviewers do have lots of difficulties underlying who are the target user, what are the data used, and many technical details seem to be missing, and they sometimes cannot even understand the visual design or the overall workflows. So this points out to the first tension that we identify in VA system research. On one hand, VA systems are typically very complex, but on the other hand, we so far do not have a shared standards or common language for documenting or communicating VA system. This makes our communication extremely difficult and sometimes insufficient. The second issue, which is not surprising, is about evaluation. Actually, evaluating VA system has the largest number of criticism types. For example, they can be insufficient or using wrong methods, or not conduct with real-world users or real-world data sets, and the reviewers also complaining for lacking comparison with baselines, quantitative perspectives, or actionable insights. And in fact, 60% of our interviews saying that evaluation is the single most grand challenge for VA system research. So this leads to a second tension. So VA system, the methodology for VA system research has rooted in the human-centered approach that is quantitative and subjective in nature. While they are definitely wonderful, we should be aware that in the computer science and the general science field, people are embracing more about quantification and objectivity. The third one, is the relevance. So asking question like, what can the research community learn from VA system research beyond solving the domain problems? We have analyzed on the claimed contribution types in 30 papers published in last year's VA system, and we found that the most common argued contribution types are the evaluation, the VA system, or the VA workflow that are designed on an ad hoc basis for a particular application problem. But on the other hand, we do observe some emerging contribution types, such as the author's own reflections, data models, data set, that has a higher chance to generalize to different domains. However, we note such contribution types are still limited in both size and types, which definitely requires future research. So this leads to the third tension that we identified. So the goal of VA system is often to create an ad hoc software, but for research, we're always keen to derive the general knowledge. So in summary, we identified 3 tensions or problems in existing VA system research, including lacking of the standards, and when we need to be more aware of the quantification part, and how can we produce general knowledge from VA system research. And of course, we are not here just throwing questions. We really want to use this as an opportunity to call in for actions, to think about how can we make VA system research more valuable, impactful, and rigorous. Towards this version, we will first argue that there is a need to create a knowledge base of VA system. So historically speaking, we must remember that Kepler's law actually comes from the Tycho's very ad hoc observation of the planets and stars. So in a very similar manner, we argue that our VA system research is probably at the pre-Tycho stage. We do need some efforts to collect existing VA system research, to analyze and derive some general knowledge and theory work, such as a pattern and anti-patterns. And second, we argue that there is a need to augment our existing design study methodology with some different approaches, such as the software engineering approaches. For example, the software engineering field has formal language such as UML to document software. So in a similar way, we think that it would be really helpful to develop a standard for documenting and share various systems. And the second, the software engineering has a long tradition in automatic testing of software. So how can we apply those approaches to VA systems? And thirdly, so the software engineering field will also summarize thousands of softwares to derive design pattern and design anti-pattern. So what are the best practices in VA system research that can be built from the thousands of systems that we already built? And lastly, we do find that we so far cannot reach an agreement on how should we evaluate VA system research. And we do hope that our work can spark more work to apply those science of science approach to collect the data and to analyze how can we conduct better research. And also there are many, many open questions, such as should we value novel visualization too much? Should we ask for open source VA system codes? And should we ask for comparative evaluation for VA systems? We do hope that our work presented here can spark more discussions in workshops, in panels, in viewpoints to make our field move forward more vibrantly and rigorously. And thank you very much for your listening, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much for this thought-provoking paper. So some of the issues that you brought up that people raised about why their paper got rejected are relatively general. Did you ask people to rank them? Because sometimes there's issues that make a paper rejected, but there's a whole bunch of others that maybe are less critical.
And yes, we try to ask our interviews so the importance of different issues, but their answers is that it often depends on the degree. So for example, the evaluation might not be insufficient, but it's hard to quantify how efficient it is. So it depends, so we cannot reach an agreement on that.
Okay, another question asked about what do you think about so this is hard. What do you think about the future of visual analytics at this conference? Since most VA papers are closely related to application domains, should we have an industrial track like many data mining venues to accommodate these application visual analytics papers?
Yeah, I think I should better throw this question to you. Yeah, but I do think that we can spark some discussions on how should we change our review progress. For example, should we have a separate track for industrial applications? Those are actually making impacts in the real world scenario. For example, Professor Kim mentioned yesterday there was a working VA system paper that was fantastic, but for some reasons, it cannot be accepted in our current review flow. So I'm really looking forward to discussing tomorrow your panel discussion.
Right, exactly. There will be a panel on Friday where we can discuss that more. Thank you very much. And please approach the speakers after the session. But there's more papers. Stay here. Thank you very much for the presentation. So the next presentation will be given by Xichuan Chang, and it's called Visualization Design Practices in a Crisis, Behind the Scenes with a COVID-19 dashboard creators.
This mic's too tall for me. Hello, everyone. It's so wonderful seeing everyone this year in person after experiencing the last 3 pandemic years. And maybe what we have seen more than the real life people are those hundreds and maybe millions of visualizations that communicated data about COVID cases, numbers, deaths, and hospitalization, vaccination testing. Many of us have seen visualizations produced, and sometimes we're found not really following the so-called best practice and guidelines in academia. And for example, I remember a lot of people critique this map design, like why you don't normalize your data when plotting the choropleth maps. And probably maybe myself is one of them, because last year in our Kai paper, we find that only 37% of the visualizations in our review were applied some kind of normalization. But we also see these visualizations during the pandemic and evolve and change over time, and in particular in this real-world practice. But these changes in visualization design also reflect the dynamic nature of this crisis, its urgency, and the constantly changing context. But it is also worth stepping back and ask why, what happened, and how so. So what we don't know yet is how designers approach design on their own terms and for their own situated terms. Accordingly, one of our research questions, how did creators engage in visualization design during the pandemic? So to answer this question, I interviewed and actually I initiated conversations with designers working at different agencies. And you can tell from this overview, I did interview study with 26 of them. Most of them, they were from the federal and the state health departments and mainstream news media and other organizations. And we characterize different phases involved in the design practices during the COVID-19 visualization production, ranging from the expansion, from the creation to the expansion, and even to the maintenance and the termination phases, and how these goals, tools, and technologies, labor, and the determination of success changes over time. But for the sake of time, today, I would like to highlight only one piece of finding today. That is, what we found is visualizations are the results of negotiations between human actors, such as designers and general public, and non-human factors, such as the existing policies. So I want to show you one example here. Well, on the one hand, people were demanding data and down to the zip code level. hopefully you guys can remember that at the beginning of this pandemic, and everyone really wanted to know, okay, what's happening in my community? How many cases and death numbers in my neighborhood? However, the existing policy, really constrained designer in designing these visualizations using this low-level granularity of the data. However, this increasing public demand has also influenced the designers and the leadership to make changes accordingly. But this process involves a lot of invisible work, such as developing a decision memo for the commissioner, and still visualizing the data as this low-level granularity essentially did not really align with the existing policies. And meanwhile, designers were building visualization tools and systems at the same time. So when it's approved, it's ready to be published to the general public. But it is definitely not something like, it sounds a good idea and they can do that digitally. So these findings really suggest we can conceptualize visualizations as boundary objects, as they are the results of a continuous negotiation between the human actors such as designers and the general public or the audience, and the standing policies and the regulations. And the goal is to support conversations between stakeholders who may not hold the same, basically actually the divergent viewpoints. Well, this process involved in creating and delivering these boundary objects also provides important lessons on how to change things in the future. Another example here, so some of the background, if you guys remember that many of the organizations report this breakdown information by demographic categories such as race and ethnicity data. Well, presumably it's basically for the social good, right, the so-called. And this is really an important initial step towards understanding the health inequity and how this pandemic influenced different populations in different ways. Well, however, our participant described how these health disparities, which were noticeable and salient in those COVID dashboards, led to the negative reactions, such as the fear of certain racial groups that experience a higher burden of COVID infection and death, which actually further create this marginalization. This is a story that told by one of my interview participants, and this is a director of a public health department. Like a teacher calling, I'm so scared to go to my school because there's a lot of black kids, as the dashboard shows that black people are more likely to get COVID. However, from the designer's perspective, they don't want people to be feared. So they decided to have some data products and weekly summary interpreting what that actually means, and explain why these communities are see more disparities and more COVID cases. So as our participants explained, these health disparities during the pandemic reflect the long-standing inequities in health, which are created by the social and the structural determinants of health. So I think this finding is really striking to me in a way that it really made me think of what is the role exactly of visualizations in addressing the broader societal issues such as the health inequity. So we argue that instead of sometimes superficially plotting the data as is, it is crucial at least spend more time and dig into how they may become and why they become what they are, with and through visualizations possible. And the race and ethnicity data is one of the research topics that deserve more care. Well, to quickly recap, this paper will contribute a qualitative empirical research examining the visualization design practices during this pandemic. We also highlighted the tensions between the designers, the general public, and existing policies. So pointing out these limitations and tensions imposed on visualization design is essential as it will uncover the shortcomings within the paradigms designated as the so-called best practices that may not appear in the lab setting. And by conceptualizing the visualizations as the boundary objects, we provide a new way of thinking of visualization. And we often think, visualizations as a kind of a static tools or system that can solve our domain problems, which is basically what we call the design studies. And now we see the visualizations functions as a negotiation process that involves human and non-human actors to bridge the separate knowledge among different stakeholders. As such, a question to consider is actually, what are the acceptable visualizations that serve as a means of communication negotiation? What that actually also indicates is that in the future, when we design visualizations, we may consider expanding our attentions to the different phases of design. And for example, even from the creation, maintenance, and termination, what are the opportunities? Does termination of visualizations means a failure? Not necessarily. We hope the pandemic's over and we've never seen those COVID dashboards, right? And another consideration is that, which is truly, what we want to adapt is what are the evaluation approaches in assessing visualizations at different stages. And finally, another area that is exciting, at least to me, is how to examine the broader societal impact of visualization. And these are two current research questions I'm going to forward in my next studies. So how visualizations can help change the policy making, and how visualizations can be designed and truly address the health equity. And that is the end of my presentation. And before I end it, I want to say I'm on the market this year. If we don't have a chance to talk today, and you can see me probably next week in UT Austin at ESCS Rising Star or in Georgia Tech. So happy to talk more about the opportunities.
Thank you very much. One of the things I was interested in is you talk about these tensions between human players and then the non-human player, which is the policies. Is there any severity grading on these tensions? Like which tensions get resolved more easily and which are more problematic for designers to deal with?
So the question is more about how we're going to solve the problems or the tensions?
No more, it's, what type of tensions do designers have most trouble with and which are more difficult to solve?
Okay, so basically it really depends on what kind of organization's agency, right? So you can tell, if you work at different federal and state health departments, you will face additional, more logistic stuff you have to deal with, and what are the policies can constrain them. So one way that I think the designers can actually push forward is how the designer can serve as a bridge between the general public, because they're gonna actually constantly getting enough feedback from the audience, directly or indirectly. So if they can have some of the evidence to push the leadership to deal with that, I think that's one of the tensions, and I think it's been the opportunities to address this tension. But also I think you can tell from the whole pandemic and also even the crisis, and how to address the general public demands is another attention that happened to the designers. The way the approach, I think it's more about communication and how to address the misalignment of considering what is the true story versus the trustworthiness of the visualization. I think it will be a long way to go, but this is a crucial problem.
And can you briefly say something about these tensions and how the parties that you talked about evolved through this experience of dealing with each other?
So the experience of dealing with, between the designers, general public, and policies?
Yeah.
The approaches to deal with that, I think that's a long story. I can spend another hour on that, but to be short.
You need to make it short, please.
Yeah. So to be short, I think is the way that they have multiple teams to work on, the public demands. If you by any chance you will see some of the platforms, even online, the chatbots will be helpful in addressing some of the emerging public questions. And over time, I think a lot of public health agencies, and they even develop a new methodology or visualization queues and to provide a view that the general public can post questions and get quick answers to that.
Yeah, thank you. Let's thank the speaker again. And
Thank you so much.
the next presentation will be given by Hannah K. Bako, and it's called Understanding How Designers Find and Use Data Visualization Examples.
Great. Can everyone hear me okay? No? All right. So, hi, I'm Hannah, and today I'll be presenting a paper on understanding how designers find and use data visualization examples. And this work was done in collaboration with Ji Liu, Leilani Battle, and Leo Liu at the University of Maryland. So idea generation is an integral part of the creative design process, and it's also the part that designers struggle the most with. So when designers find it hard to come up with new design ideas, they often rely on examples to find inspiration. And these examples provide a visual framework for designers to understand problem domains, build, generate, and validate their ideas, as well as communicate their ideas. In visualization, examples are not only necessary for finding ideas on what visualizations a user can create, but also possible ways they can implement their designs. So consequently, there's a plethora of visualization examples that can be found on design galleries for visualization libraries such as D3, VegaLite, and ggplot, and also on sharing platforms such as Tableau Public and subreddits such as Data is Beautiful. So we know visualization designers use examples, but there's a gap in our understanding of how exactly these examples fit into the day-to-day design and implementation practices of these designers. But before I continue, it's very important for us to highlight the huge body of work that explores example usage practices in engineering and graphic design. And these works highlight influential findings related to example search, storage, and retrieval, as well as concepts such as design fixation. However, because engineering design is focused on the development and performance of physical objects, and graphic design is purely concerned with the visual representation of information, their results are not readily transferable to visualization design. Particularly because visualization design is focused on the visual representation of data. And as such, the resulting designs are heavily informed by and constrained to the underlying data that the designer is trying to visualize. So we need to investigate how the example usage practices of visualization designers consent or differ from designers in other fields. So we tackle this goal by using semi-structured interviews with both novice and professional visualization designers. And our findings cut across two key activities. First is the search for examples, and here we provide key insights on why and when examples are needed, and how designers search for examples, and also what strategies they use when looking for relevant examples. Second, we explore the use of examples, where we identify 3 key strategies for designers use to implement their gleaned ideas from examples. And finally, we discuss insights on behavior that cuts across these 2 activities, such as how designers select useful examples, how they reuse and curate examples, as well as the concept of design fixation and how designers solve these challenges. In this talk, I'll focus on a subset of our findings, and we'll be framing these findings around key implications for future work. But please refer to the paper to see details on our other findings. So we asked participants to describe scenarios in which they used an example to create a visualization. And our goal was to identify strategies they used to isolate and transfer ideas from examples to their designs. And we identified 3 key strategies. First, participants often use more than one visualization example to generate design ideas. Using multiple examples allows designers to select and merge different visual elements that inspire them. For example, S2 describes using an example, a set of examples they found on a blog post and a portfolio as inspiration for a visualization on the lap time of race car drivers. This participant describes the influence of these two charts that I highlighted on the representation of lap times in their sketched idea. And this participant was able to translate their sketched idea and additional elements such as the driver's headshot into their final design. And this is a perfect illustration of how ideas can be incorporated from multiple examples into a single design. The second strategy we identified was replicate and modify. And this is because examples may sometimes be used as a baseline. Participants would often describe making copies of interesting examples they found online and using their data and also altering the designs to fit their goals. And the various modifications of Mignard's visualization on Napoleon's march through Russia actually are great examples of this kind of example usage strategy. And the major reason for replicating and modifying examples was to change the core features of an example, such as adapting a visualization to their data, or introducing new functionality like interactions, or sometimes simply just modifying the aesthetics of a chart. Finally, we observed a trial and error approach to example use. A few designers would resort to a brute force approach where they implement multiple examples or ideas until they find one that's acceptable. Participants often resorted to this strategy in situations where they were stuck in making design decisions. And this approach was very common when using tools that provide quick access to visualization design, such as via recommenders like ShowMe. Participants would also report using this approach to iterate over designs that they had created in the past in a bid to find one that was appropriate for their data or the task. So what do our findings really mean for the Viz community? Well, first, there's still a lot that's unknown when it comes to understanding example-based ideation of visualization design. Future research needs to explore how we can measure and model the effects of examples on ideation outcomes. For instance, how do we determine how many ideas can be transferred from a single example to a design? Also, how does the timing of an example's introduction influence the design ideas that a user has? We also find that existing visualization authoring tools do not adequately support any of the example usage strategies that we observed for our study. So how to easily turn an example into a usable visualization template is a promising research direction. Another implication of our findings are that the current process for retrieving examples only supports search using specifications of visualization features and styles. And this may not adequately support designers' needs. So for us to understand why the visualization retrieval needs to improve, we first have to understand the difference between novice and professional designers. And the biggest difference is really just their experience. Novice designers are often inexperienced and limited by their knowledge of visualizations and programming. As a result, they need examples, but often don't have the right language to find the examples they need. And these designers are also more interested in examples that they can easily implement. Because novice designers find it hard to construct the right keywords when seeking examples, they need to use multiple iterations of search and keyword refinement before they can find suitable design examples. Another challenge they face is the fact that the examples that may be returned from search queries are often irrelevant or incompatible with their data. And sometimes even when the right examples are returned, they're not always inspiring to these designers. On the other hand, our professional designers rely heavily on their experience to determine what visualizations to create. Hence, they aren't always actively looking for examples, but when they do look for examples, the goal for them is to explore new and interesting visual designs, as opposed to finding specific implementations for examples. Professionals also tend to focus on visualizations that they find both effective at communicating insights as well as those that are aesthetically pleasing. We also observed a difference in how these designers compose their search queries. So novice designers would often use design elements in their queries or focus on the task that they were trying to achieve. On the other hand, professionals were more likely to use the type of data or other underlying characteristics as their search queries. So based on our findings, to truly support the needs of designers, we need to enable more ways to search for examples. Specifically, we need to go beyond specifications as search parameters to accommodate more modalities, for example, natural language descriptions for visualization search. We also need to improve the diversity of search results while maintaining relevance to the search terms that a user provides. Finally, there's a lot of focus on the effectiveness of visualizations. Consequently, a lot of visualization tools, particularly recommenders, focus on visualization heuristics as a guide when generating visualization designs. However, our results show that effectiveness is not the only thing users are interested in. We explored the concept of criteria for selecting useful examples. And most participants were in agreement that the most useful examples were those that were effective at communicating the right information to their audience. However, participants were equally interested in the visual appeal of an example as a determinant of usefulness, often mentioning this in the same sentence with effectiveness. And our participants were also more likely to use examples that matched design priors, which are simply design ideas that they had in mind before they initiated the search for examples. Furthermore, we find that for professional participants, there was a recurring discussion of restricting their example search and selection to only designs they felt their audience would understand. So for instance, our participant here talks about how in the past they have used a chord diagram in their personal practice, but they would not use that in a professional setting because they would have to spend a lot of time teaching their clients how to use this chord diagram. Similarly, another participant discussed sticking to designs that they knew users would understand, even if it wasn't the best for the data or the task. These results call for us to change our perspective when it comes to thinking about visualization design. Specifically, how can we balance the effectiveness, aesthetics, and target user needs when prototyping design alternatives? This is also particularly important for visualization recommendation and generation tools. Our findings present 4 key research opportunities for the community on enhancing visualization retrieval, example-based ideation, and authoring, as well as the automatic generation of design alternatives for users. Our work highlights salient challenges and strategies visualization designers use that are largely ignored by current authoring tools. Our hope is that this work can spark research in a new direction towards supporting example-based visualization authoring to better support the needs of everyday visualization designers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. First question. On the one hand, referring to examples can promote creativity. However, on the other hand, they can also lead to fixation. How do practitioners create a balance between creativity and fixation?
So that's a great question, because that's something that actually came up a lot with our participants, particularly with the students who don't really know what exactly is right, and so they would tend to stick to designs that they saw because they just felt, well, if everybody is creating this visualization, then it has to be the best. So I think what we can do is to really try to find, I don't think we quite have an answer yet to this question, but it would be nice to see how we can figure out ways to support this balance between creativity and letting people expand their creativity and the designs that they can create without necessarily restricting them to the examples that we provide. But this is also a question that I'm currently trying to answer with a bunch of experiments, and hopefully I have a better answer for you next year.
Excellent, thank you. Next question is about, or related to where and how designers find their examples. So for example, D3, Vega, Tableau all produce relatively similar looking visualizations that are designed for a specific analytic task, for example, but they are maybe less inspiring or artistic. Do you have any thoughts on what resources or what spread of resources, example resources, should be looked at or provided, or
Should be provided,
or could be, or what is the most useful? What thoughts do you have on the resources?
I think the two things that really we did actually ask participants where they found these examples, and you can find that in the paper. And the things that really kept coming up were Google, because that's just what's most accessible. But they also tend to look into visualizations or charts that were shared on platforms like Tableau Public, or also Data is Beautiful, and all these other search communities. I think the biggest challenge that we saw for these participants is just when it comes to artistic expression, the tools that are available aren't very expressive when it comes to helping them implement these more bespoke visualizations, and also the time that it takes to actually create these visualizations. So I think in terms of access, we need to improve how we present. We need better tools to kind of help them find more artistic type visualizations, and we also need better tools to help them implement these designs when they actually create them. So I think this is just a largely unexplored space that we still have a lot of questions and that we need to investigate. So.
Okay, thank you very much for all of the wonderful presentations in this session. And yeah, please go and enjoy your break, or come up here and talk a bit more to our presenters.